We kick off the week's broadcast with a big decision from the Comelec 2nd Division. In its ruling released today, the poll body determined that there is no intention on the part of Bongbong Marcos to deceive the electorate as to his qualifications for public office. This means that a petition filed by martial law victims to cancel Marcos Jr.'s certificate of candidacy has been junked. Two other petitions, this time to disqualify him from the race, remain pending. As expected, Marcos Jr.'s camp welcomed the decision, thanking the Comelec for allowing their bets right to continue his presidential bid. His spokesperson, attorney Vic Rodriguez, says they are now extending a hand of unity even to the fiercest of adversaries in order to ensure a clean, fair, and credible elections. Good evening, I'm Gretchen Ho.
I'm Robbie Alampay. You're watching The Big Story. Bongbong Marcos overcame one hurdle to his bid for the presidency as the Comelec denied the petition to cancel his certificate of candidacy.
But petitioners composed of martial law victims are not giving up the fight as they are set to file an appeal in a few days' time. Mobile journalist Jacob Lazaro gives us a front seat to the big story.
That's one less problem for Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos's race to Malacanang, as the Commission on Elections 2nd Division unanimously dismissed the petition seeking to disqualify his candidacy.
The division noted the following. First, the CA decision on the tax case of Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Did not contain any disqualification.
The petition was filed by a group of martial law survivors with lead counsel attorney DOTr of Free Legal Assistance Group. The group argued that Marcos Jr. committed material misrepresentation when he said in his certificate of candidacy that he was eligible to run for president, despite his conviction on a tax violation in 1995. However, the Comelec 2nd Division noted that the Court of Appeals did not explicitly include the penalty of perpetual disqualification when it affirmed Marcos's conviction by the Regional Trial Court. The Comelec also ruled that the National Internal Revenue Code did not impose perpetual disqualification as penalty.
The 2nd Division ruled that the National Internal Revenue Code of 1994 took effect only 1986, whereas the cases involved in this case were 82, 83, and 84.
The 32-page decision was written by Commissioners Socorro and Ting and concurred in by Commissioners Antonio Co. Jr. and Ray Bula. Attorney Domingo Cayosa, former president of the IBP, agrees.
Nakakabit kasi yung provision for disqualification dun sa imprisonment. Tinanggal ng Court of Appeals yun. So in effect, the Court of Appeals also removed the basis for any disqualification.
The 2nd Division also cleared Marcos on the grounds of moral turpitude. As of Monday, there are still 4 petitions against Marcos with pending decisions, both in the 1st and 2nd Divisions. For their part, the petitioners said they are preparing to file an appeal within the prescribed 5 days before the Comelec en banc. Mobile journalist Jacob Lazaro, we are One News.
What will be the petitioners' next move now that their petition against Bongbong Marcos has been junked? That big question and more with one of the petitioners and chair of Kapatid Group, Fides Lim. Ms. Lim, welcome to The Big Story.
Good evening, Robbie.
Ma'am, maybe you could explain a bit more. What does it mean that this is it was a material question, but at the same time they said they do not necessarily agree that there was a falsehood in the filing of the COC. What exactly does this mean?
Yes, precisely. Our lawyers right now, led by attorney Teddy Te, are preparing a motion for reconsideration, which will be filing before the end of this week. Because what the Comelec 2nd Division did, in fact, is very strange and very contradictory. While it says that there was misrepresentation, that it recognizes that there was materiality o ibig sabihin substantial o significant yung ginawa niyang pag-check, no, dun sa kahon, yung sa item 11, box 22, na wala siyang kinakaharap na kaso na pwedeng maging basis, no, para sa perpetual disqualification from public office. Very strange, very alarming, no? Dun sa first part ng decision ng Comelec, sabi niya, merong recognition na nagkaroon ng material questions or material misrepresentation. While the Comelec, with all due respect, is not a court of law, and yet it reverses itself on the second part of its decision. And in fact, no, it casts aspersion on the final judgments made already by the Regional Trial Court and the Court of Appeals na nagkaroon ng final judgment na hindi nagbayad si Ferdinand Marcos Jr. ng kanyang taxes, tsaka hindi siya nag-file ng kanyang income tax returns, na ibig sabihin under the Omnibus Election Code. Kaya nga kami dumulog sa Comelec para iharap itong kasong ito dahil merong issue dito na perpetual disqualification from public office, which includes the highest office of the land, the presidency.
Now, we know that you are going to appeal, but beyond the appeal process, ano pa po ang mga balakid sa kandidatura ni Bongbong Marcos? We know that there is also other pending petitions with other divisions of the Comelec. Hindi pa po tapos ang laban ni Bongbong Marcos. Hindi pa po tapos. Could you discuss a bit what other hurdles stand in the way of Bongbong Marcos?
Kung sinasabi ng kanyang spokesperson o kahit si Ferdinand Marcos Jr., sinasabi niya na mag-move on. Well, kaming mga petitioners at maraming mga Pilipino ay hindi sumasang-ayon dun sa ginawang very controversial and very contradictory, very alarming decision. In fact, the battle has just started. Kung akala nila ay nagwagi na sila sa puntong ito, mag-isip sila. Ang kawawa dito ay tayong lahat. Magkakaroon tayo ng isang presidente na hindi nagbayad ng taxes, tapos mismo yung second division ng Comelec ay nag-aabogado para sa kanya, i-reverse yung mismong naging decisions na ng dalawang korte. Anong klaseng institution ang meron natin sa ngayon? Anyway, no, this decision of the Comelec, in fact, opens a can of worms. Nagbukas siya ng lata na kailangan suriin at siyasatin. Na kaya dudulog ngayon yung mga abogado namin, magfa-file sila ng motion for reconsideration sa Comelec and Bank. There are also other avenues. Kung kailangan umakyat ng Supreme Court, there is always that avenue.
Okay, maraming salamat po. That was one of the petitioners, Pides Lim.
Thank you.
Campaign season has not officially started, and yet candidates are spending millions in Facebook ads. Vice President Leni Robredo tops the list, spending 14.1 million pesos as of end 2021. This is according to the Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism. But her spokesperson, Atty. Barry Gutierrez, says the ads were all funded by volunteers. Senator Sherwin Gatchalian is a far second with 8.5 million pesos, while Senator Ping Lacson has spent 5.3 million. Not on the list is Bongbong Marcos, who has not reported any ad spending on his official Facebook ads so far. Researcher and associate professor at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, Jonathan Ong, says this was not a surprise, as the Marcos have first campaign through political fan groups, community pages, and micro-influencers.
These are the other big stories tonight. We check in on the first day of the No Vax, No Ride policy's implementation. The unvaccinated and those partially jabbed were asked to alight jeepneys. Daily COVID cases in Metro Manila appear to be going down despite a community transmission of the Omicron variant. But an uptick in cases is closely being monitored in the provinces. After losing his visa battle, unvaccinated tennis star Novak Djokovic has been deported from Australia. These big stories after the break.
Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. It's a long day today for commuters in Metro Manila, with public utility vehicles randomly checked as the no vax, no ride policy takes effect today.
But day one of the new rule was fraught with challenges, especially over the validation of vaccination cards. Mon Gualvez shows us how day one went.
The volume of jeepney passengers in Monumento have eased up by 1 p.m. And upon taking a jeepney, I noticed that the driver did not check for vaccination cards. But he at least made sure that physical distancing is enforced inside the jeepney. Authorities only allow 70% passenger capacity in public transportation.
Sobra yan, sobra. Bawal sabi. 70% lang.
Same is the case with the modern jeepneys in Blumentritt. The driver admitted that he only checks for vaccine cards when he knows he's going to pass by a checkpoint.
Bakit di mo na sinecheck yung mga vaccination card?
Pag maraming pasyero matungkukan, sinasabihan ko yan nga, sir, ang sasakay dito yung may bakuna lang. Hindi po, no? Hindi ko tinatanong. Hindi naman pinapansin ng pulis pag hindi po, no?
There are some drivers who ask their passengers if they are vaccinated. But the big question is how they validate the vaccination cards presented to them when they don't even look at the photo on the card nor ask for another ID to verify. The PNP Highway Patrol Group mounted a checkpoint in Rizal Avenue, Caloocan to enforce the policy. Those who are only partially vaccinated were asked to alight and go home.
Warning muna yung ginagawa natin. Purely advocacy muna yung ng highway patrol ngayon. No? Pero yung mga glaring na violation, tineteketan na natin.
Many passengers are in favor of the policy and emphasize the need for safety amid the threat of the Omicron variant.
Mas mainam na po yung ganito, mas mahigpit tayo kasi mahirap na eh. Lalo na po sa akin mag-OFW, mag-a-abroad.
Abala kasi na po yung biyahe. Kailangan po pahinto-hinto para i-check yung mga vaccination card. Pero mas okay naman po para safe po lahat dahil fully vaccinated po.
While reminders are in place for commuters, the PNP HPG also warns operators and PUV drivers that blatant violations may result to fines up to 10,000 pesos and a possible suspension or revocation of franchise. For News 5, Mon Gualvez, we are One News.
While the Philippines has been enforcing new rules to limit mobility in Europe, protesters are taking to the streets to go against new curbs. Take the case of Amsterdam, where thousands went to the streets to oppose government restrictions. The Netherlands had one of the toughest lockdowns in Europe, with bars, restaurants, and venues closed since mid-December. In the face of growing public opposition, Prime Minister Mark Rutte partially lifted the lockdown on Friday despite record COVID infections. Protests led by anti-vaxxers also erupted in France against the new vaccine pass approved by Parliament. The new bill bars unvaccinated people from entering restaurants, cafes, cinemas, and trains. France is on its fifth wave, with new infections reaching more than 300,000. Thousands of cyber attack complaints amounting to as much as 2 billion pesos have been lodged before the central bank during the course of the pandemic. For the BSP, this is reason enough to pass a Financial Consumer Protection Act. Mea Los Baños explains.
Over the course of the pandemic, the Bangko Sentral received thousands of complaints on financial transactions totaling over 42,000. In 2021 alone, that amounted to 540 million pesos. Since 2019, that has already reached 2 billion pesos.
A majority of these cases have been deemed closed, but the process was long and arduous. And for many complaints, the resolutions were unfavorable to the consumer.
Central Bank Governor Ben Jokno tells the Senate cybercrimes rose as digital transactions gained traction during the pandemic. Based on BSP's records, the top three cyber frauds are identity theft, phishing and social engineering schemes, and payments done with no visual card checks. In 2020, hacking and malware attacks rose over 2,000% from previous years, while phishing increased to 302% from 2019.
In fact, complaints related to the use of internet banking and mobile banking account for 45.2% of the total complaints in 2021. Hackers and scammers took advantage of the digital infrastructure and consumer vulnerability to perpetrate crime.
Jokno laid down these figures before the upper house as he vouches for the passage of the Financial Consumer Protection Act. If passed into law, regulators will be able to hold hearings on consumer complaints and implement restrictions on unreasonable interests, fees, or charges. The Insurance Commission and the Securities and Exchange Commission also backed the measure. Senator Grace Poe, who chairs the Senate Committee on Banks, Financial Institutions, and Currencies, is also pushing for FCP.
Expansion comes with its own range of challenges, from the small-scale fraud and investment scams to the hacking of one of the largest banks in the Philippines, which left at least 700 accounts compromised. Yung perang
Poe says as digital banking makes it easier to reach the goal of making 70% of the population banked by 2023, it would be crucial that measures are in place to ensure that regulators can efficiently oversee the system. Reporting for News 5, Mea Los Baños, we are One News.
For the big story in sports, tennis world number 1 Novak Djokovic is flying back to Belgrade, Serbia after losing his visa battle in Australia. Over the weekend, a 3-judge federal court unanimously upheld the Australian government's decision to cancel his visa due to his vaccination status. This dealt a final blow to Djokovic's hopes of chasing a record 21st Grand Slam at the Australian Open. While the Serbian star may have been unable to defend his crown, Naomi Osaka was able to start her title defense on a strong note as she defeated Colombian Camila Osorio to advance to the second round. The 4-time Grand Slam champion will play American world number 54 Madison Brengle next on Wednesday. Time for another quick break. When we return, the daily growth rate in Metro Manila has been declining, but experts say it's too early to tell whether or not NCR has reached its peak, especially with the community transmission of the Omicron variant. Officers have gunned down one of 3 inmates who have escaped the maximum security prison of the new Bilibid. And this year is about breaking stereotypes. Social media star Sasa Girl gives us an exclusive interview on being this year's calendar girl.
Good evening, you're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. While the daily growth rate of COVID cases in Metro Manila appears to be going down, OCTA research says it's too early to say whether or not the numbers have peaked.
COVID infections continue to spread outside of Metro Manila, with provinces now seeing spikes in cases. Camille Samonte with the details.
With an additional 37,000 COVID infections, the Health Department has confirmed the community transmission of the Omicron variant in Metro Manila. The DOH says the number of COVID cases has been doubling every 2 days. In fact, the average daily cases in NCR has already reached 17,000 from just one more than 6,000 last week.
Bagamat hindi ho nakakahabol ang ating whole genome sequencing, we already have determined that there are local cases already.
But despite these considerable numbers, the OCTA research group has actually observed a decline in Metro Manila's growth rate over the past few days. According to Professor Guido David, NCR's daily growth rate is now at -1% compared to the 11% growth rate last week. The reproduction number in NCR has also declined to 2.67% from more than 6%. Likewise, the positivity rate in the metro has also slightly decreased from 54% to 50%. Despite this, the OCTA research group says it is still too early to tell if COVID cases in Metro Manila has already reached its peak.
Maging complacent tayo, maging kampante, gusto natin tingnan na masdan natin mabuting trends at siguro next week Yusek, makikita talaga natin kung talagang bababa na yung bilang dito sa NCR.
But while the COVID situation in Metro Manila is slowly improving, provinces are now the ones seeing an increase in COVID-19 infections. These include Benguet, Cebu, Pampanga, Bataan, Iloilo, Davao del Sur, and Isabela, just to name a few.
Even sa Mindanao, may nakikita na tayong simulang pagtaas ng bilang ng kaso kasama dyan sa Zamboanga City at Davao del Sur.
With the condition still unstable, the OCTA research continues its call for the public to get vaccinated. For News 5, Camille Samonte, We Are One News.
Time for next look at some of today's big stories. The National Bureau of Investigation foils the attempt of alleged drug lord Kerwin Espinosa and 2 other detainees to escape. The NBI says that they got word of Espinosa's plan to escape through the hole of an exhaust fan. Security measures in the detention facility have been tightened since then. In December, a Makati court junked one of the government's cases against Espinosa for failing to prove his alleged conspiracy to commit illegal drug trading. 3 inmates, meanwhile, managed to escape the maximum security compound of the new Bilibid prison. According to the Bureau of Corrections, the 3 detainees are armed and dangerous. This afternoon, one of the inmates was killed in a pursuit operation by the local police and Bucor officials. Bucor has released the identity of the escapees as they continue their pursuit. The Department of Labor urges private employers to adopt a paid quarantine and isolation leave program for workers that are to be affected by COVID-19. Labor Secretary Silvestre Bello notes that this is on top of the workers' existing regular benefits. Under the paid quarantine leave benefit, employees who have exhausted their leave benefits will still receive their wages throughout the isolation period.
A win for the LGBTQIA+ community. TikTok sensation Sasa Girl is now the latest calendar girl of a liquor brand. Once known as the role solely for biological females, the social media star breaks the mold as the first openly queer calendar girl for the White Castle whiskey. What was once a funny edit posted online is now a groundbreaking project for the LGBTQIA+ community.
kami lagi nagpapainom mga bakla, bakit hindi kami napupunta sa calendar girl? So ginawa ko, gumawa ko ng picture na na parang calendar girl. Laking gulat ko, yung mga White Castle nag-contact sa akin.
As haters were quick to bash, Sasa Girl explains the real message behind this year's calendar.
May mga nagsabi na bakit kasi hindi na lang yung tunay na babae, like hindi na lang yung mukhang babae talaga yung kunin. And then sa akin hindi naman yun yung mensahe talaga. Kasi nga, gusto natin i-break yung standards ng society.
White Castle Whiskey also broke the tradition last year when they chose YouTuber chef Ninong Rai as their calendar boy.
Shot puno! Medyo busog lang po tayo ng konti dyan kasi po ako po yung umubos ng sisig. Ano na, Chi? Ano na, Bea? Tara na!
For Sasa Girl, she hopes that this project will open doors for more queer individuals to break norms and stereotypes. For News 5, MJ Marfori, we are One News.
Reunited, and it feels so good. An elderly couple's emotional reunion video is making rounds on social media.
After being apart for more than 4 months because of COVID, they welcome each other with a tight embrace. Tatay Menandro and Nanay Gloria have been married for more than 40 years, and this is the longest time that they've been apart. Menandro had to leave Quezon for Manila after testing positive for COVID-19. But what was thought to be only a few days for quarantine turned into months. This as he was also diagnosed for a rare autoimmune disease while receiving treatment. Gloria was then counting the days until she can see her husband again.
Happy, happy, happy. Huwag iyak na. Dapat happy lang.
Their son explained, of course, his parents are obviously very loving and affectionate. So it was no surprise that his father's absence took a toll on Gloria's mental health. It was also said that she even had to take medication for depression and anxiety. Thankfully, the two are finally reunited.
Partner, yan ang true love in sickness and in health. Together or apart, mag-aantay, di ba? Oo.
Ay masaya. And I'm sure maraming mga reunion nagaganap na ganyan ngayon. Yung mga lumalaya sa mga quarantine nyo.
Tama.
Happy Freedom Day sa inyong lahat.
Partner, kailan ba kita makikita? Baka yakapin din kitang ganyan.
Wala, social distance muna tayo. Pero ang tagal. Ang hirap magbilang no? Kasi sunod-sunod Iba-iba yung oras nang nagpa-positive sa amin. Kaya parating nauusod yung bilang namin.
Huwag kang mag-alala, inaantay kita.
Yeah.
That wraps up today's big story. Catch us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250.
Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. Mask on.
Wash hands.
And stay safe, Philippines. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. We are One News. Have a good evening.